Are you liking that tea?
It's so good.
By tea, you mean chicken juice. Hot chicken juice.
Chicken broth.
Of course, drink whatever you want, but is it normal that people just drink chicken broth every day?
I don't know.
Did lots of people do that?
I don't know.
I've never had just a cup of chicken broth before.
It's like chicken noodle soup without the noodles.
Oh, yeah, I understand what it is. But you're kind of eating the salty equivalent to me because you're having potato chips and chicken broth, and I have black tea with a tea biscuit.
Yeah.
It's really kind of the same thing for different flavor profiles.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I like it a lot.
Well, welcome everyone to another episode of I Love This, You Should Too. And we are members of the Alberta Podcast Network, which is locally grown and community supported. My name is Indy Tea Biscuit Randawa, and with me is my beautiful co-host, Samantha Hot Chicken Juice Randawa.
Don't call me hot chicken juice. That's gross.
What are you drinking?
Chicken broth.
Okay. Chicken tea.
Chicken tea.
Well, today we are going to be talking all about Ed Wood. Not just the person Ed Wood, but the 1994 Tim Burton film Ed Wood. It was my pick, so it's something that Samantha has never seen, something that I loved growing up, and we're going to see if it still holds up. But first, let's thank our first sponsor of the episode, and that is the Well Endowed podcast by the Edmonton Community Foundation. It's hosted by Andrew Paul and Elizabeth Bonkink and produced by Lisa Pruden. It explores the impact of passionate people who are working to make Edmonton a strong and vibrant city. The Edmonton Community Foundation helps people create endowment funds, and the podcast tells the stories of how those endowments intersect with the community. If you want to hear more, you can visit them at thewellendowedpodcast.com, or you can listen to their podcast wherever you are listening to us right now. So check them out. All right, are you ready for some Ed Wood talk?
Yeah.
Because you've been kind of steeped in the 1950s, not by any choice of your own, but I got you to watch The Day the Earth Stood Still, which you liked.
I liked it.
We did The Iron Giant, which is a kind of homage to those 50 sci-fis and takes place in the 50s, and you like that one as well?
I liked that one more than I liked The Day the Earth Stood Still.
Oh, really? Okay. But now we are going to a filmmaker who made those types of kind of schlocky sci-fi movies that are paid homage to by The Iron Giant with this 1994 film, Ed Wood, telling the true story of director Ed Wood.
Yeah.
So, Samantha.
Yes.
I love this movie. Did you?
I liked it.
I kind of felt that's where you were going.
It was fun. It had its moments, but I don't think I can say that I loved it.
What did you like about it?
I loved the cast of characters. There's a lot of really fun individual personalities. I liked the costuming was fun. It was very of the time. And I liked the idea of the storyline of this filmmaker who has this other side to him, and he's proudly wearing it out on the surface.
And this is something that's always hard to do, but do you think there is anything that stopped you from going to that next level? Is there any shortcomings in this movie, or is that something we'll just kind of explore through this conversation?
I don't think I can come up with something specific. I think that's something that we'll have to talk about when we get to it.
Because I loved this movie growing up, and I think I still do, but upon this rewatch, I realized that when I saw it, it was kind of the perfect time for me. It was probably when I was 17, 18, 19, around then, when I was really getting into filmmaking, and watching it then, of course I would love it. It is about filmmaking, and it is kind of about the type of filmmaking I did, that low-budget type stuff. And it's about one artist's passion and not listening to anyone that was trying to tell him not to do that. So, of course, for a young, aspiring filmmaker, of course, now I'm a jaded, old, failed filmmaker. But at the time, of course, it would make sense that I would love this movie. And this character was uncompromising, or maybe not uncompromising. That's not the right word, because if you gave him the money, he would do whatever.
Yeah.
But he was still, in his own way, maybe true to himself.
Yeah.
Regardless of what he was making.
Yeah. He had a very good idea of who he was.
He did, yeah. That's a very good way of putting it. I think my question for you then is, for someone who doesn't have that kind of background in filmmaking, not the same interest in the art of making film, just in like enjoying films.
Yeah.
Is it as interesting, or do you feel like you lose something because a good part of the plot is about that passion?
I agree that I kind of lost something in the like filmmaking part. I mean, I've done community theater, and like I think that's kind of similar to doing like no budget movies. I think the whole like technicality of filmmaking might have gone over my head a little bit, and maybe that is one of the reasons why I didn't love it, because I wasn't like intimately knowledgeable about the subject matter.
And I wonder, like with any movie, how much of an expert do you have to be? I feel like a good movie can overcome that. And I wonder why, like, certain things we feel like, oh, well, I don't know that thing, so I don't get it.
Yeah.
While something like a Marvel superhero movie, I don't know what it's like to be a billionaire within a futuristic iron suit, but everyone is fine getting into that.
Get into Iron Man, yeah.
But then we can be like, oh, 50s movies, like I don't understand that stuff, so I wouldn't like that.
Maybe it's because Marvel movies are just so larger than life that you kind of are able to suspend reality a little bit easier than this kind of like livable situation.
Mm-hmm. You don't find as much to relate to,
Yeah.
or maybe you feel like you don't when it's specific and more grounded almost.
Yeah, like this is almost too normal of a situation for me to be able to like suspend my reality and be like, okay, well, what if I was a no budget filmmaker?
Right.
Whereas with Iron Man, it's like, okay, well, I'm obviously never going to be Iron Man.
Well, not with that attitude.
So it's a little easier for me to say like, oh yeah, I can totally get into this because it's not something that I'm ever going to live.
That makes a lot of sense. Before we start breaking it down, I just want to ask you, what is this movie about? What is Ed Wood about?
A filmmaker who likes women's clothing and creates films that aren't mainstream and might be like a little out there for regular Hollywood films. And also he has a like ragtag group of colleagues.
Yeah, and I love that you included that at the end, because I always thought of this movie as maybe a filmmaker's movie, because that kind of seemed like the central idea to me in the past. Mm-hmm. Now, though, I find that the friendship, specifically that between Ed and Bella, I feel like that's the real driving force of the movie. It's less about the actual movies they're making and more about this kind of community of misfits that they have kind of banded together to make those movies.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's get into the movie. I feel like we can talk a bit at the beginning, some context of the movie, Ed Wood. So, the 90s, Tim Burton, Johnny Depp. We'll probably talk a bit about them.
Classic combination.
Yeah, it really is. Like Lagosi and Wood, to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But then we'll also talk about, within the movie, the idea of filmmaking, how they present it there. I want to talk about Ed Wood, Bela Lugosi, their maybe less about their real lives, but them in this movie, the performances. And then I think we could talk about that friendship, that group of characters, that family that they've created.
Yeah.
So let's start off with this film's director, Tim Burton, and a guy who probably sees a lot of himself in Ed Wood. And that's, I would imagine, what really drew him to this project.
I could see that.
Because Tim Burton, especially in his early stuff, he really feels like an outsider. He talks about that very openly, that he felt marginalized to a certain extent. And of course, when you're someone who still fits most of the majority things, you're allowed to be like weird and out there for one certain thing. I used to like Tim Burton. I like Tim Burton. I like Tim Burton's older movies.
Yeah.
Because this movie is kind of at the peak of what I liked from him. He started off with his Pee-wee movie, and then we covered Beetlejuice on this podcast, which I love. Then in 89, he did that Batman movie, which came out when I was like 4 or 5, and I was obsessed with it. I remember seeing it in theaters. It might be the first movie I remember seeing in a theater.
Oh, interesting. Interesting.
Then in 1990, he does Edward Scissorhands, which I also love. We talked about it on this podcast.
Yeah.
You can go check that episode out. 92, he does Batman Returns. Not as successful, but still very successful. And there's a lot of really interesting stories about that, how essentially because his Happy Meal toys didn't sell as well, that's why he didn't get the third movie.
Oh.
It really came down to the toys, is why he didn't get to do the next movie.
That's a wild reason to not bring back a filmmaker.
I think there's full documentaries about that, or at least some podcasts. You can get into it.
Did the toys suck, or...?
Well, he wanted Danny DeVito as a grotesque penguin, right? And
right.
I thought it was great, but that's a hard toy to sell to children.
True.
That is what a lot of the issues were. That they wanted things to be more marketable as toys, and he wants them to be weird and off the wall because he's Tim Burton.
Life, yeah.
Yeah. And that didn't sell.
Huh, interesting. I get it, but also that's kind of sad.
Yeah. There's so many very, very interesting stories about Tim Burton movies that almost happened. Like his Superman movie, and they did test shots and everything. Nick Cage was Superman.
Oh.
And I think Chris Rock is Jimmy Olsen. Who was Brainiac? It was someone cool. And the artist sketch of what Brainiac would look like was essentially just like a triangle with a skull on top. It was all this really weird stuff. And all of these movies came very close to being made. Kevin Smith wrote the script for it.
Oh, wow.
And just never happened. But you can look up pictures of Nick Cage as the Superman. It's very interesting. And you'd say like, oh, that would never work. But people thought Mike Keaton as Batman would never work as well. But we're not talking about that. Then in 94, Ed Wood comes out. So he's coming off of 2 Batman movies, and Ed Wood was a hard movie for him to get made. Uh-huh. When they started doing makeup tests, they realized they couldn't make anything look like I almost said Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi.
Right.
And then they realized, like, oh, you know what it is? Nobody's ever seen Bela Lugosi in color. So then they said, we need to make this movie in black and white. And as soon as you say you're going to make something in black and white, your production company drops you. Because black and white movies don't do well. They didn't do well past, like 1960.
Once you could do color, yeah.
You're instantly going to lose at least half of your audience. And that was definitely the case on this one. They chopped his budget to $18 million. And this movie only made less than $6 million. So it was a huge flop. And this is
$6 million. Wow.
Yeah. And this is coming off of the 2 Batmans, which combined for like 700 million or so.
Wow. That's wild that's such a drop.
And when you say like, yeah, why wouldn't people go watch this movie? Well, they loved the movie Batman with superheroes. Why wouldn't they want to see this movie about a cross-dressing, little-known 50s director in black and white?
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, yeah, because of the things I just said. Yeah.
Got it.
And he has an interesting career because that kind of is the end of it for me.
Really?
That's what I love. Those movies there, I feel like each one of them is amazing, brilliant in so many different ways. His next movie is Mars Attacks.
Right.
Which, did you ever see that?
No. I remember the poster.
It is also kind of an homage to 50s sci-fi because it is one of those, but with like a big budget. It is silly and weird, and it's fine. It's good. It's not a bad movie. Then he does Sleepy Hollow, which again, I'm like, okay, that's good.
That had Christina Ricci in it, right?
Yeah.
At like peak Christina Ricci?
Well, I think peak Christina Ricci is Casper, personally.
But... Oh, no, I mean Hollywood peak Christina Ricci.
And then he does this kind of era where it's like, wouldn't it be cool if you saw this thing you already know, but with a fun Tim Burton twist on it?
Right.
And for like 5 movies, it was fun. Because you have Sleepy Hollow, Planet of the Apes was garbage, I didn't like that. Big Fish, I think, was a very good movie. It's like, what if a fairy tale, but not a specific one like all of his other ones would be, had a Tim Burton twist. And that was a lot of fun. Then you get Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Corpse Bride, Sweeney Todd, and that's kind of the end of like me having fun with, like, what would a Tim Burton version of this world look like?
Right.
Because after that, it becomes tedious, and we know what a Tim Burton version of this would look like. We've seen it already.
Yeah.
And that's where we get things like Alice in Wonderland, Dark Shadows.
I kind of liked the Alice in Wonderland.
I absolutely hate it. But
really?
Yeah, I thought it was just terrible. What did you like about it?
I like the look of it. Because I feel like the Disney-fied Alice in Wonderland is too, like, fluffy and nice.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this story about this girl who's, like, going to a kingdom and is, like, basically being, like, hunted. And, like, the growing and the shrinking and, like, those kinds of things were really cool to see from Tim Burton.
I felt that movie looked like someone who had hundreds of millions of dollars and was told to do their best Tim Burton impression, but still make it bright and silly.
Right.
And they tried to do that, but to me, it looked like a lot of current amateur photographers who are like, oh yeah, I want to take cosplay photos. And then they just do this ridiculous CG background that looks terrible, but it all looks absolutely the same as everyone else.
Right.
And that's what this looked like to me. While when you look at something like Edward Scissorhands, there are things that look like that. Like, it is straight ripped off from a lot of German expressionist films. But you can see his influence, and he is combining that influence with what he sees his current world as when he had that, like, kind of pasteled suburbia.
Right.
And you can see him filtering our world, or his perception of our world, with what he wishes the world was, or what he sees in those, like, German expressionist films.
Oh, okay.
While when I see something like Alice in Wonderland, I see just, like, here's a bunch of stuff, and he's just throwing everything at the wall because he said, you loved it when I had these things before, love this. And I'm in the minority because that movie made $1 billion.
Sweeney Todd?
No, Alice in Wonderland.
Oh, Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to me, it looks like just terrible. It looks like just everything being thrown at it.
Oh.
And it doesn't have like a singular vision, which is kind of what I come to expect from Tim Burton in his previous stuff.
Right.
It just looks like someone doing a bad impression of him, but not realizing the depth of his influences are what drew people like me, and I think a lot of his earlier fans, into it. They just think now, like, oh yeah, fairy tale, but dark. And we get so many of those. That is like a genre within itself now, just dark takes on fairy tales. There's so many of those. And he kind of led the way on that in a lot of ways. And it just seems so far removed from not just the visual artistic sense, but the idea that his characters also seemed to have a certain amount of like wounded integrity to them. All of his characters in the past were these misfits. Your Pee-wees and Batman and Edward Scissorhands and Ed Wood. They were these people that are not a part of their society, and they know it, and they were treated with such respect and dignity from Tim Burton that was the grounding force of all of this fantastic stuff going around it.
Right.
But then you get down to Alice in Wonderland, and you're like, hey, how about a new wig for Johnny Depp? And like, what is he doing? He just has like wacky eyes, and I don't like any of those characters. I don't respect any of those characters. And I don't feel that the movies respected them as anything more than a caricature.
Right.
And that's why I think they're not successful. Did that make sense? I kind of just said a bunch of stuff off the top of my head because I never really thought about it. But I think that's why those later ones don't work for me.
Okay. It makes sense.
Like, did you like Alice? Is she a character you're like, wow, she was well done? Or you're like, yeah, she was fine?
I think as a whole, I liked it.
Mm-hmm.
I also think I don't think about movies as hard as you do.
I think I just can't like a movie if I don't like any character.
Right.
And you can like hate a character, but that's eliciting a response.
Yeah. You
I
feel
just was
passionate
kind
about
of
something.
mildly annoyed by all of the characters. And then Dark Shadows, terrible, terrible piece of garbage. Big Eyes, you'd think I'd like that one because that kind of is him going back to older stuff. I thought it was very poorly done. And then his last two, the adaptation of The Home for Peculiar Children and Dumbo. So everything he does is an adapted work.
Right. I remember Dumbo being terrifying to look at. I didn't see
I actually want to see Dumbo because
I would like
it
to
looks
see
like it's
it.
scary enough that it might be interesting.
I'd like to see it, but I remember seeing all the like press shots and like I think I saw a trailer, and that was one of the scariest animals I've ever seen in a movie.
All right, we should check out Dumbo.
We
I
should.
want to watch
Okay.
that one. But all that being said, his later stuff just kills in the box office. So I am, if you just go by capitalist measurements, I'm objectively wrong because I think Ed Wood is in his top 3 movies and it made $6 million. And I think Alice in Wonderland is the worst maybe overall and it made $1 billion.
Yeah.
So what do I know?
What do you
Dark
know?
Shadows made $250 million.
That's wild.
It's ridiculous.
But what about Frankenweenie?
So Frankenweenie, I like. I had actually seen the old Frankenweenie is a remake
Okay.
of his own work.
Oh.
So I had seen the old one, which I liked, and then the new one, I was like, well, it was fun, I guess.
I just remember Frankenweenie looked super cute.
Yeah. There's a short I have, the original Frankenweenie, which is live action and is about a boy whose dog dies and he brings it back to life.
Huh.
That was good.
That's a heartwarming tale.
He also has the short called Vincent, which is also very autobiographical about a misfit boy who just wants to be like Vincent Price.
Oh.
And that is the most clear parallel, I think, between Tim Burton and Ed Wood, because Ed Wood grew up idolizing Bela Lugosi, meets him late in Bella's life, and then puts him in his movies, and then he dies, and that has a lasting effect on Ed.
Right.
In Tim Burton's case, he grew up and made a movie about how much he wanted to be like Vincent Price. Then he does get to work with Vincent Price. He narrates the short Vincent, and he is in Edward Scissorhands.
Right.
A small role because he died, I think, during production or shortly after production.
That's sad.
I don't remember, but listen to our Edward Scissorhands episode because we talk about it there. And he got to work with his hero, and you'd think that they were going to have this lasting relationship of how they would work on things together, but it never got a chance to happen because of Vincent Price's passing.
That's so sad.
It really is.
But yeah, I can see that parallel.
And then also, both of them, Ed Wood and Tim Burton, have this recurring cast of characters.
Right.
With Tim Burton, it's usually whoever he's dating or married to at the time. In this one, Lisa Marie, who plays Vampira and then would be back in Mars Attacks. They were together. Helena Bonham Carter later on. I forget who it was earlier than that. But yeah, he just puts in his girlfriends a lot.
That's weird.
Yeah, it is. But maybe his greatest relationship of all, of course, is that with Johnny Depp.
Maybe that's the true love story.
I think it is. Although now it's been a while since they've made something together, though.
Yeah.
But at this time, they had done Edward Scissorhands together, and then they did Ed Wood. They would go back to work on Sleepy Hollow, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Did he voice Corpse Bride? Maybe he did that too. But also, for sure, Sweeney Todd and Alice in Wonderland. Oh, and Dark Shadows. And I haven't seen the newest ones to know if he's in there. Were you a big Johnny Depp fan?
Yeah, I like Johnny Depp.
In which era?
I think I first experienced him probably in Pirates of the Caribbean.
Oh, rough.
I like him though. I think he's fun. I never knew him as the like Edward Scissorhands or Ed Wood Johnny Depp. He's always been this like caricature kind of thing.
And I think he totally becomes a caricature of himself, much like Tim Burton in my mind. But Johnny Depp, first of all, we should mention that we're recording this when his trial has been settled and he won, right?
Yes.
And just because, someone else was worse doesn't mean you're great.
No.
I want to put that out there because I also should say I know very little about people's personal lives. I don't care.
Yeah, famous people, you don't care.
I don't care about it. I want to see what they're doing on the screen. But from being on the screen, Johnny Depp went from being maybe my favorite living actor when he was doing Crybaby, Edward Scissorhands, Ed Wood, What's Eating Gilbert Grape, Dead Man, Donnie Brasco, that mid or early to mid 90s. Really, the 90s Johnny Depp.
Right.
I loved him. I didn't come into it a little bit until later because I was quite young.
Mm-hmm.
But I did see his movies when I was a kid, and I did really like them. And then I got to experience... This was maybe the first person in my lifetime that I got to experience just like, oh, I don't like you anymore. And reaching the point of, like, you've done more garbage than you've done good stuff, and I guess I can't say you're one of my favorite actors anymore.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah. But with all of the trial stuff recently, I, again, don't follow it, but I just, from an outsider's perspective, it seems real strange that people were so gleeful to have, like, a woman be proved wrong in her accusations. And there seemed to be a lot of, like, see, this is what women do. And I was like, no.
No.
She's bad. I get that.
Yeah.
It was a trial. Cool.
Yeah.
If that's what happened, I don't know about it. But if she's a dick, she's a dick. And she did some very bad things, from my understanding, right? But also, he kind of did, too. I know he's the victim in that certain circumstance, but it kind of, from my understanding, what a lot of people's reactions have been is like, he is just a hero and a saint now.
Yeah.
And women always be lying.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's not what our takeaway should be.
No.
Our takeaway should be like, hey, I guess the justice system worked for once, so good.
Yeah. Yeah. This isn't like how we measure people from now on.
Yeah.
Which is like, it's rough. That's not great. That is how people are approaching it. I did follow a lot of the trial, and I think that the outcome is warranted and good, but I don't think that all women either shouldn't be believed or are evil or like that kind of thing.
I think there's
Which
just
is
a
like
lot of people who think, like, who actually believe most people who make claims of sexual assault especially are lying.
Yes.
I think people think that,
Yeah.
and you people are wrong. It is very rare. This was one of those rare circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely.
That happens.
And she clearly thought that she could get away with it, and she couldn't. And a whole bunch of other stuff ended up coming out about how she was really abusive, and she kind of got what was coming to her.
Yeah. All right. So let's say we're not going to talk about anything more.
No.
But I will talk about Johnny Depp and how I think he is a douchebag in his films, because that's something I know about.
Okay.
He started off as, in the 90s, he was like, oh, I'm a heartthrob, but I'm like the reluctant heartthrob. And
Right.
it worked. It was a great bit. It was like him and...
He's kind of like shy, but good looking.
Yeah. And he was like, I could be your leading man, but I'm not gonna be. I'm gonna take these interesting roles.
Yeah.
I'm going to be Edward Scissorhands, and I'm gonna do... Have you seen Benny and June?
No.
What's Eating Gilbert Grape, Ed Wood? Those were all through the mid to early 90s, and they're all very good. He does Dead Man when he could have been making bigger movies for sure. Donnie Brasco, I think he was fantastic in. Fear and Loathing comes out in 98. There is garbage mixed in there, but
Right.
these are all great movies. I love Chocolat from 2000.
That was a good movie. Maybe that was my first experience of Johnny Depp.
And he continues to be good. Like, I thought Finding Neverland in 2004 was very good. Although I don't think the remake of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was necessary, I didn't think it was bad. Very surprisingly. I thought the tipping point of Burton remakes comes after that, and I thought Chocolate Factory was fine. It's not as good as the
he
original.
played Willy Wonka.
And it was an interesting performance.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't love it. I didn't hate it.
He did
was
some cool
trying
things with it,
something.
yeah.
And it was fun.
Because Willy Wonka is such a like crazy character to begin with,
Yeah.
and then he like overacted it and
Well,
made
when
it
you're-
something.
You're going up against a legend,
Yeah.
right? You're not going to be Gene Wilder.
Exactly.
No one can be.
No.
So he did something, and that was fun.
Yeah.
But then we get into Pirates of the Caribbean, and somehow that was what he got nominated for Best Actor for, which is still boggles my mind. Not any of those other performances that I just talked about.
Yeah.
It's Pirates of the Caribbean.
Oh,
And he makes a bunch of those. He makes Alice in Wonderland. He makes The Tourist, which I think he also got nominated for a Golden Globe for Best Actor.
really?
And The Tourist If nothing else, The Tourist convinces you that awards are garbage because he got nominated for that. And it convinced me, well, I already knew, but it convinced me that capitalism doesn't work because that is a hugely successful movie and is such a piece of garbage.
Oh, right. It had Angelina Jolie in it.
So bad.
I do remember this being bad.
Then he does Dark Shadows. He thinks it's cool to play Tonto in The Lone Ranger. I think he does Into the Woods, Mordecai, another Alice movie, the Fantastic Beasts stuff.
Oh, right. He's Grindelwald.
Or was.
Was.
And it's just a bunch of garbage to me. And I get, like, those are successful movies. So again, I'm clearly wrong because people love those movies.
Yeah.
But I just remember this actor from things like Ed Wood.
Right.
And that's what he was. He was an actor. He was different in every role. If you saw Crybaby and Edward Scissorhands and Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, you'd be impressed that one man has that range.
Yeah.
And then if you look at all his other stuff, you're like, oh yeah, he has like a cool dark makeup that's slightly different in each one. That's what he does. He's being Johnny Depp.
It's true.
And he came from this, like, being an outsider to being a caricature of what rich people think an outsider is. So he's like, I'm going to wear lots of rings and lots of scarves. I'm so rock and roll. I have my shitty band called Hollywood Vampires. If it's not, like, on point enough of, like, this is what I am, and I'm like a vampire in Hollywood. No, we get it. Everything about your persona screams that you think you are different from everyone else when you are the biggest beneficiary of being exactly what people want you to be.
Right.
That's what I think of Johnny now.
Okay.
Sorry, I got a little intense there because I really loved him, and then I got so sad of where his career went.
He's currently filming a TV miniseries called Puffin's Impossible.
Well, I'm on board for
It
whatever
looks
this is.
very cute. He plays Johnny Puff.
Oh, okay. See, now I'm in.
Yeah. He's also in a like a period piece about Jeanne du Barry, who was a mistress of one of the kings of France. So he plays a king of France, which I think would be really interesting to see.
But this movie takes place when, for me, both of these people are at their peak,
right,
and doing great things, and people did not like it. Because this movie didn't do well, which also makes me think no one's going to listen to this episode, because we've been talking for like a half hour and we haven't even talked about the movie yet. So let's get going.
Okay.
We can talk a little bit about the art of filmmaking, both as represented on screen in the movie and as represented on screen by the movie.
Okay.
Because this movie, I think, looks beautiful. What do you think about it?
I think it was a very nicely done film. I think it could have been very cool in color, because this is like a time when there was color to film in. So I think...
Do you mean 94 or 50 whatever?
50 whatever.
Okay.
Was there color?
There was. It was just prohibitively expensive for the most part. That's why everything Ed Wood would have done would have been in black and white.
Okay,
yeah.
I didn't know that. But yeah, so I think lots of the things in this movie are very beautiful in black and white. Like Juliet Landau and Sarah Jessica Parker both have like really great coloring and faces for being in black and white, which I thought was really amazing. And I thought that the cast of characters didn't lose anything from being in black and white.
I prefer this to be in black and white. I can't even picture it in color, but I think it's because I know Bela Lugosi. I've seen the Dracula movies, and I was like, I can't picture him in color.
Right.
Would he have brown hair? That seems weird. I don't even know. Weird. It would just seem odd to me. Or to see Ed Wood, like, is he wearing a pink Angora sweater? I assumed it was pink for some reason. I think there's a poster where it's in color.
I thought it was cream.
Oh.
I don't know why. I imagined it as cream.
Yeah. And those movies seem like Vampira. I couldn't see her in color.
No.
That would be so strange.
She is also one of those characters that is just very black and white.
That's
just
true.
To begin with.
It was strange when we see her not in character and her hair is blonde.
Yes.
That was odd to me.
Yeah. And she just has like normal makeup, not her like Vampira eyebrows and
Although
stuff.
they're still pretty.
They're still pretty out there.
Vampiresque.
But she looks a little bit less costumey.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, I really liked the black and white, but It is funny because you're going to make a movie about a terrible filmmaker. But do you lean into that and make your movie look like one of his? Because you're doing it in black and white, so people might think that that's where he's going. But we talk about Orson Welles in this movie a lot. And if you're not familiar, I think all we need to know is a very well-regarded good filmmaker, in my mind.
Right.
And this movie looks much more like an Orson Welles film than it does a Ed Wood film.
Right.
And that's a good thing, because Ed Wood movies look bad. They look cheap, because they were bad and cheap.
Bad and cheap. Yeah, that trailer you showed me last episode, I was like, is this real? Like, is this a real movie? Because, yikes.
I think I also have to say right now, because a lot of movies, they'll be like, oh yeah, but his stuff wasn't really that bad. It was played up as bad as a joke. His movies are terrible. And I watch bad movies, and I like a lot of them, and I think they're fun to watch. Many of his are unwatchable. Like, Glenn Glenda is just a loose collection of scenes and monologues and stock footage of Buffalo. It doesn't make any sense, and it's barely a movie. Plan 9 has a plot, but it's one thing when things are bad, like cardboard tombstones falling down.
Right.
That's kind of fun. But Ed Wood also wrote the script for most of these, and he is a terrible writer and doesn't understand how people talk fundamentally. And it shows, and his movies are very hard to watch. They're not good.
My favorite of his terrible writing is the secretary, played by Sarah Jessica Parker, interacting with Juliet Landau.
I can't hear you. I said, I know what you said. I just can't hear you. And walking off.
Like, she's like, oh, I get it. Ha ha. See you later. Like, oh, it was terrible.
I'm going to add in the show notes, you can click on a link to see comparisons of the shots from the movie Ed Wood to the real movies that they are from.
Oh.
And it is identical.
Wow. Yeah, that's doesn't say a lot about Ed Wood's filmmaking abilities.
Yeah, and I think a part of this movie maybe is about how that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
This isn't about someone who's like, oh, I'm the worst, but I'm going to overcome it. Or someone about how, like, I wasn't appreciated in my own time. I feel like the quality of his work is inconsequential to this movie. It is about his enthusiasm and his relationships more than anything.
Okay.
I think.
I agree. I think.
But back to more things about the filmmaking in it. I loved when someone says, like, oh, don't you want to do one more for protection? And he goes, what's to protect?
Yeah.
The idea of doing one take on everything stresses me out.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And he just puts whatever in. He also didn't shoot anything that he didn't use. Everything he shoots is he's going to put in.
Well, that's probably why Glenda is so random.
Yeah, well, he just got a bunch of stock footage and was like, yeah, I'll just put it in the movie. This looks cool. I'll put it in the movie.
Yeah.
He just had a fundamental lack of understanding of how filmmaking works.
Yeah.
And he was a director.
And writer.
And actor. He does it all.
Nobody
does everything. Just him and Orson Welles. I loved the octopus and how they have to, like, flap the arms around because they don't have the motor. I love how the opening credits of Ed Wood mirror the opening credits for Bride of the Monster. Bride of the Ghoul? What's that one called? Either way, it mirrors, like, one of those movies with all of the tombstones and everything. And I think, like, a lot of the talk about filmmaking comes to a head when we have that scene where Ed Wood talks to Orson Welles. Orson Welles played by Vincent D'Onofrio, but clearly dubbed over by Maurice LaMarche.
Yeah, you were having trouble with that when we saw it. You were like, that's not his voice.
Well, also, I love Maurice LaMarche, and all, like, Futurama fans will be like, hey, that's Maurice LaMarche.
Oh.
Or if you know Pinky and the Brain, he's the voice of the Brain, which is an Orson Welles impression. That's what the Brain is.
Oh.
So he's just doing the Brain's voice, but it's over top of Vincent D'Onofrio, which is very strange.
That's odd. That's an odd choice.
It is, and it wasn't done well.
No.
I think that was one of the few things I was like, well, that was just poorly done. He
Bad
sounds
lip-syncing.
like... I didn't even have as much issue with the sync as much as LaMarche was clearly in a studio, and it just sounds like he's talking right into your ears while everyone else is on a set. It just sounds different.
This big booming...
In that scene, I love that they are equals. And Orson Welles, for some people, is the greatest filmmaker of all time.
Uh-huh.
And Ed Wood, for many people, is the worst filmmaker of all time. And they speak about the process of filmmaking and their passion on completely equal terms.
Huh.
And I love that about this movie, because that's what this movie is about. It's and that's what Ed, the character of Ed Wood, I don't know as much about his real life, but Ed Wood, as we see in this movie, that's what he's about. Mm-hmm. He is equal opportunity for everyone. He doesn't care who you are. He's just this completely non-judgmental person. And I feel like Tim Burton is doing that same thing in this.
Right.
His movies are terrible, but this movie never seems to condemn him or make fun of him. It's coming at it from, he's a passionate filmmaker, and that's all that matters. So when you have the scene about him and Orson Welles talking about it and talking about how the studio system's getting both of them down and how they just want to do their art, and about how visions are worth fighting for. Why spend your life making someone else's dream? And that's just what Ed needs to kind of reinvigorate himself and go and finish that picture.
I thought that was fun, like fun timing in the movie, was that he like all but given up, and then he comes back after talking to Orson Welles and is like, "Okay, let's do this." Yeah. And that was nice. That was like meeting your hero, and it went well.
It was exactly what he needed, and that is clearly fictitious, that meeting, but it's so symbolic of what we think of Ed Wood, or at least what Tim Burton thinks of Ed Wood, about someone who is passionate and the quality kind of doesn't matter. And his struggle as a filmmaker is different than your typical artist's struggle, I feel like, because there is that monetary thing about he needs to make the money, and he's underappreciated, and that's all typical, but there's also this struggle of staying true to his own self. And I feel like that's not on the surface as much because Johnny Depp's performance is so, I don't want to say flat, but constantly optimistic. Right? He doesn't have many moments. So there's that one, maybe, when he's in the bar right before he meets Orson Welles. And there was one earlier in the movie when he's saying, like, you know what? Maybe I just don't got it. And he has those moments, but they don't last, right? He's never really down on what he's doing. He just pops right back up each time.
He's, like, fearlessly optimistic.
Yeah, let's talk about Ed's character and Johnny Depp's performance. I like it quite a bit. And the only reason I'm saying I don't love it is because we're going to talk about another performance that I think is better from this movie.
Yeah.
But I love that he is playing this man with more enthusiasm than talent, and he just is smiling somewhat maniacally throughout the movie.
Yeah.
What'd you think of Johnny Depp's performance?
Not knowing anything about Ed Wood, I obviously can't compare what I know of Ed Wood and Johnny Depp's performance, but I found him really engaging, and it was kind of fun to follow along in his, like I said, fearless optimism and, like, complete, like, ignoring of any consequences or bad things that might happen. And I liked that, because I feel like if you're pursuing a career in the arts, you kind of have to have that, because it is a lot of no's or under budget or, like, disappointment, not getting the part, that kind of thing. So I feel like this was a portrayal of how you kind of have to be if you're pursuing show business. And I think I liked that because it was a kind of best case scenario for someone who's kind of failing up.
Yeah, because I know I keep saying, like, oh, he was a bad filmmaker, and he was, but there's another thing that's really important is he made films.
Yeah.
He got it done.
Yeah. I've
had one feature-length film made, and it killed me. I hated it. I never wrote another one after that. It was the worst.
That's sad.
Yeah, I guess. But also it makes you realize, like, that's not for me. Because it's not just like, oh, do you have the talent to do this? Do you have the perseverance to go through that process? Because merging art and business it's not a good mix, but that's what the film industry is. It's an industry, right? So it is half people who are full of a enthusiasm, of vision, of artistic integrity, of all sorts of ideas. And then the other half, or probably closer to 95%, is people who are like, how do we monetize this? How do we make money off this? And it's going through a team of producers, of business people, of funders. And that is who gets the final say in a lot of things. And art, like if you just think about it, we all know movies are a business, but if you think about it, like that's such a backwards way to make art, because film is a business more than it is an art form a lot of the time.
Right.
And some people can work within that. Some people can work against it and overcome. Me, it killed me, it crushed me. I don't want to deal with it. I can't. I hated it. I hated someone going like, well, let's change this to this person because this will make more money. This will sell if we do this. Do we need more love scenes in it? We need to have a sex scene. We can't have a sad ending. And it was like, but that's not the same movie. And they're like, yeah, you're right. It's not. It's a movie that will actually get made. And
right.
It's so to have someone who goes through that process and gets like just knocked down constantly and just bounces back up. So while I may not appreciate a lot of his artistic choices, the perseverance of someone like Ed Wood is amazing. And I think that is more important to this film, the film of Ed Wood, than his actual abilities are.
Right. Oh, okay. Cool. You're so good at like summarizing.
Thank you. It's when I just start going off in my own head and talking about nonsense. Sometimes it works.
It works more often than when I talk about nonsense.
I don't know. You have to listen to the podcast. I think your nonsense is pretty solid. Too.
Oh, solid nonsense.
I know Samantha is not a listener of the podcast.
I hate listening to my own voice. I really do. You do such a good job with it, but I just like...
Well, the feature film I made, I have a role in it as well. I've only seen it once.
Yeah. I just really, it makes me anxious to listen to my own voice.
I get that. You get over it. Well, you have to get over it when you edit, though.
True.
So I've gotten over it now. Yeah. I don't like the sound of my own voice, but I hear it so much.
I like the sound of your voice.
That's all that matters.
Because we're married. And I'm going to listen to your voice for decades.
Yay. And so will all of you out there, right?
Exactly. Yes.
All right, back to Ed Wood.
Oh, yeah, we're here about a movie.
I love that the first introduction we get to him is him saying the lines. It's when he's doing that play. It's like a war play.
Right. And I forgot about the war play, actually. Yeah.
The actors on stage are like just monotone and not doing a great job. But he has so much more enthusiasm while he is mouthing the lines along with him. And that's such a great setup for who this character is. Full of enthusiasm, garbage product.
Yeah.
And for a movie that is about the 50s and filmed in the 90s, this movie is pretty progressive towards both the cross-dressing characters and the trans characters as well. Because the 90s, you see representations in movies in the 90s, and they're not good.
Great.
You see representations in movies now, and it's not great.
Very true.
But this one, I think was, because that is kind of a big part of this movie, is just that everyone is kind of unapologetically themselves, and that bravery and enthusiasm is what carries this movie a lot of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I loved his just fearless enthusiasm. It was wild to see someone with that much like bravery and enthusiasm in a role where all he was getting was rejection.
And it's such a fine line too, because I think we all know people in our lives who are far more confident than they should be.
Yeah.
But he is. But there's something so charming and maybe innocent in his confidence, because it's not just that he thinks his work has been great. He's like, well, next time will be better. Like when he says, oh, the worst picture I've ever seen, huh? Well, my next one will be better. And he believes it. I truly believe that he believes that.
Yes, yeah.
But he's not someone who's braggadocious about like, oh, my movies are actually great. He's just fine with everything, with all of those compromises he has to make, with people not getting through the door on a take, with people being stuck in graves. it's not like he's saying, no, this is what greatness is. He's just kind of fine with it.
Yeah.
And just like wants to make movies for the sake of making movies.
Because he enjoys it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's kind of beautiful.
Yeah. You definitely see a difference between trying to find the funds Ed Wood and like mid-production Ed Wood.
Yeah, and I love when, after that Orson Welles talk, that was kind of a turning point in that one, because he was being pushed further and further by, it was like a church that was funding that one,
it,
and they'll get baptized for it. And he was being pushed to the edge, and they were saying things when he was wearing his Angora sweater and his wig and everything, and he just goes, "That's it!" And that's like as angry as he gets, and it was like kind of cute also when he gets angry because he's still Ed Wood. Then he gets that confidence from Orson Welles, comes back, and like really takes control of the scene again.
Yeah.
And I think, like you mentioned earlier, that's one of the other main themes, is that kind of the two faces of someone and what you present. And really, Ed's journey, although it kind of happens earlier, the pacing of this movie is strange in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
The fact that we do kind of 3 movies, and where Bela dies, where he has this kind of epiphany with Orson Welles, when he comes out as a cross-dresser, all of those things happen at different times than you would expect them to in your kind of standard Hollywood movie.
Yeah.
But I guess it's, if the main story of this movie isn't the filmmaking, then it makes more sense. Like, if it's more about his journey or the friendships he makes, then I think a lot of those plot points make sense more. If you look at this as a movie about Ed Wood's career, then maybe less so. Because he's making movies already at the beginning. We don't get to see him, like, starting from nothing and then making it. But he doesn't make it to the top, ever.
No.
So I guess that's another reason why that classic formula doesn't work here. But like you were saying earlier, the two faces that people present and how that's resolved. That's a really interesting thing as well.
Yeah. I think he, like, it starts out with almost 3 faces, right? Because he's hiding the fact that he likes to wear women's clothing. And then that kind of becomes a part of his other 2 faces, I guess, if this is making this metaphor really like muddy and
What
weird.
are the other 2 then in your mind?
So, like, trying to get the money.
Oh, right.
Guy, like pre-production, and then like directing and filming.
Well, I think you could say that the directing and filming and the cross-dressing self are the true him, and that's like one together, perhaps.
Yeah.
So that's maybe the 2.
Yeah.
Because that's when he gets to be himself. And this, that's kind of what the movie's about, is like having this man find the ability to be himself and how he can do that. And it seems like the 2 things that make him his truest self are dressing how he wants and making movies.
Yeah.
And when he gets to do them together, like those few times when he's right before Sarah Jessica Parker freaks out and yells at him about, like, you people are freaks, these movies are garbage.
Right.
That whole scene, because he is dressed how he likes, but he's also found his community. And it's not just like a community of people who are cross-dressers. It's a community of people who are passionate about film. There are people who are trans as well, and there are people who are cross-dressers as well, but it is more than that.
Yes.
It's just people who are perhaps unafraid to be themselves. Maybe that's what his community is.
Yeah.
And the more we talk on this podcast and how often that idea comes up, it seems like I pick a lot of movies about people creating their own communities. It seems like so many things I pick are the main protagonist is outside of society for one reason or another, and then they are able to find and build a community that works for them.
Yeah.
And this is another one of those.
Exactly. And like found family.
Yeah.
We revisit that a lot in our podcast as well.
And that's definitely in this one.
Yeah.
And I love that the last 2 movies of mine, at least, have been those 50s movies, and each one has been about that, about someone who doesn't fit into that society, because 50s America is probably the peak of an idealized normal society. And of course, normal is set by the people who are in the majority.
Right.
And the movies that we have picked in Iron Giant, The Day the Earth Stood Still, and now Ed Wood, they are all about people who are outside of this, like, one of the most insular modern cultures we've had. that had the most strict distinctions of what normal is, what good is, what right and wrong are.
Mm-hmm.
And this is also the 50s that people love to, more conservative people clearly, love to talk about how that's when we were at our best. That's when, we didn't have these issues then. And the reality, of course, is that those issues were always there. It's just those people never had a voice.
Right.
And these last 3 movies are giving voices to those people.
Yeah.
And more than... I know when we started, the through line was 1950s sci-fi.
Yeah.
But it is all 1950s counterculture as well.
Yeah.
In all of these movies. And that's really interesting to see from these 3 different points of view. See what I did there? I taught us all a little lesson.
I love a lesson.
I think you could easily argue that this movie is more about breaking down and going against the trends of 1950s America as it is about making shitty movies.
I agree.
And I like that this biography is quite different from a lot of other ones I've seen, because you usually get a few different ones, especially when it's about an artist. You get the movie that is a tortured genius who is always struggling and always beaten down, and his brilliance isn't recognized in his time. Or you get someone who goes against all odds and succeeds, and it's this glorious, uplifting story at the end. And that's not this movie, because that's not Ed Wood.
Mm-hmm.
You could say it's probably closer to the one of a guy getting beaten down constantly and appreciated after, but he was never really appreciated after. He was, if anything, kind of mocked more afterwards. And he doesn't have, well, maybe he goes through those same struggles, but he doesn't struggle. He's confident in what he's going to do. He doesn't have a lot of moments of self-doubt. A couple, but that's not really what the movie's about.
Yeah.
And how this movie is made kind of seems like Ed feels like he's in that movie where he succeeds at the end.
Right.
We all know, and the other characters in this movie know, like, that's not what this movie is. This is not a huge success story.
Mm.
Everyone knows it, maybe except for Ed, because he has the moment when he's watching Plan 9, he says, like, this is it. This is the one I'm going to be remembered for. And in a different movie, if Burton didn't shoot this so lovingly, that would be a heartbreaking line. Because we know, like, it is in a way, because everyone's going to make fun of this movie.
Right.
We know that. But because Tim Burton has had so much respect for Ed Wood and Johnny Depp's performance as well, he has that just unfallible enthusiasm that it doesn't seem sad, because you're happy that he feels that.
Right.
He feels like this is the one. And who are we to disagree? We factually know that's not true, but I still feel good for him. I don't feel bad that he's wrong.
Yeah.
Because I feel like how Tim Burton made this movie, how he shot it especially, he gives Ed Wood the movie, the biopic that Ed Wood feels he's in, even if that's not what the content is around him. It is not a success story, but Ed feels like it is, and Tim Burton gives it to him. And it's nice because this movie gives him a bit of a happy ending, because that's not the end of his life, and he does not have a happy ending. And we get to see it in the little epilogue where it writes up everything that happened, because and his wife, who is played by Patricia Arquette, they just drink themselves to death, is where the real life story goes.
That's really sad.
Yeah, it is. But that's not where we go here, because this movie is a celebration of this artist, not a condemnation.
Yeah. That's so sad.
It is. Anytime, like, I don't know how much we can, like, talk about addiction and how sad it is, but yeah, anytime someone is just like, that's it, and they give up and they just drink or do whatever till they die, it's rough. It's very rough. And speaking of super, super sad and addiction stories, let's move on to talk about Martin Landau as Bela Lugosi.
Yeah, I only knew Bela Lugosi as Dracula.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of seems like everyone only knew him as Dracula.
For the most part. He does. I've seen a few of his other movies, but of course nothing is Dracula.
Exactly. So
although he plays Dracula in lots of other movies too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's like his pigeonhole.
monsters in general, because like Boris Karloff and like Lon Chaney and some others, because the universal monsters, like that was like the thing. We look at this movie and sci-fi and horror are silly and not well respected. The universal monsters movie universe, that was like, that's the MCU of the time. It was highly respected, even more so maybe because people would appreciate the craft of the acting a lot more than I think we look for in our Marvel movies currently.
As long as it's really flashy and there's lots of explosions.
Yeah. And I'm not even just here to shit on Marvel movies. A lot of them are pretty good. But it was different in how it was regarded, but it kind of held a similar position of how big of a deal it was, maybe.
Right.
It was the draw in for a lot of years, those monster movies. And Bela Lugosi, biggest of them all. I know people would argue Karloff, but you know.
I did like
Karloff's not fit to smell my shit. What does he say?
There's like a moment, where he gets really mad because someone mentioned Frankenstein.
Yeah.
And
he could have been Frankenstein. He turned it down.
Yeah.
He thought it was beneath him.
That's wild.
Yeah.
He could have been all the Universal monsters.
He could have. They wanted him to be.
Yeah.
Just like now when we give multiple superhero roles to the same actors.
The Hollywood curses?
Yeah, well, there's other people.
Yeah.
You can't be multiple characters in the same universe. That's too much.
No. That also makes it not make sense.
Yeah.
Especially for like the hardcore like universe people. It's like, no, he's also this. That doesn't make sense.
He's also Human Torch, but we don't talk about Human Torch. And also Human Torch has been played by a bunch of people. But back to this, I know a lot of people probably don't have the context, so for a real short version, Bela Lugosi was a very big deal. The reason vampires talk like this was because of Bela Lugosi. He's not doing a vampire voice. The vampire voice is him. And I showed you a picture of Martin Landau normally and how he looks as Bela Lugosi, and he looks more like Bela Lugosi than Martin Landau.
Yes.
And if you watch that little clip I'll put up, you can see that his performance, all we need to say is it was perfect. Yeah. He was Bela Lugosi. He's amazing as Bela.
It was amazing to watch. Someone who's that skilled of an actor really take over someone's essence.
And the funny thing is, Martin Landau is a better actor than Bela Lugosi.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to act as someone acting at something. That just seems so difficult. And I always feel like it's overrated when people do impressions, and that is what they win their award for, because you can see that person. You're just like doing that.
Yeah.
But I do think that Martin Landau, who received an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for this role, did deserve it because it's not just a great Bela Lugosi impression, but he does those moments of vulnerability that we've never seen Bela do. Like, he doesn't do that in any of his films, right? We get to see him as a sad and broken man, and that's all Landau. But he's able to do it while also channeling Bela Lugosi, and I think that's what makes it super impressive.
Oh, yeah, that performance deserved an award. Like, obviously not knowing much about Bela Lugosi and knowing that Martin Landau was not, like, an old man when he
was old, but not like decrepit.
Yeah, I just think that he did such a good job of taking over that character physically, too.
Yeah, very true.
A lot of his movements and everything were very spot on for what you'd imagine, like a 90-year-old?
I'm not sure how old he was supposed to be at this point. I thought younger, but I don't know.
He seemed 90.
He was either way, though. He had been a morphine and other thing addict for many years, so he was essentially 90.
Yeah, he was aged beyond his years. Yes. Yeah. So I think it was so sad to learn about Bela Lugosi through this lens, too, because he was a morphine addict. What did they say, with a Demerol chaser?
Yeah.
And that was, like, really the only thing keeping him going.
Yeah. But when we have scenes like the octopus one where he has to get into the water and all sorts of things, yes, he absolutely is a drug addict and that keeps him going. But I think that Landau's performance does show that he also loves making films. when he's on the street and he's doing monologues just for people, like he actually did that. He loved being Dracula. He loved the recognition. He loved the celebrity. He loved the respect that came from that. And in his small way, I think Ed was able to give him some of that back.
Right.
Even if it's not, because Frankenstein, he felt that was beneath him. So you'd think he would think that laying in this bog with a big silly octopus is beneath him.
Yeah.
But he still has this love of the craft, and even if the movie itself isn't the thing that is making him feel those accolades, that recognition again, Ed Wood is. Ed is just so constantly positive and so constantly telling him how great he is. And it's not like he's putting on a front and saying like, oh yeah, you're great, just to get him going. Ed believes that too.
Yes.
And he gives that enthusiasm to Bela. Not that Bela also gains enthusiasm, but he feeds off of Ed's enthusiasm, and that's what's able to keep him going. He's feeding from that recognition that Ed gives him. And that's kind of like the greatest gift that he could have given him. That's what he needed most.
I mean, we all need that like hype man.
Yeah.
To be like, you're so great. Good job.
And his tragedy kind of balances Ed's optimism throughout this movie. This is one of the few Tim Burton movies, especially of this time, that's not scored by Danny Elfman, and I'd forgotten that, but about 10 minutes in, I was like, this doesn't sound quite like, he sounds different, and it wasn't Danny Elfman. But one thing I love, I wish I remembered the composer's name, but either way, he included Swan Lake for Bela, because Swan Lake was used in those Dracula movies.
Oh, was it?
So it's like a nice little throwback.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I know Swan Lake really well, just from ballet. So it was nice to hear that. And I think it did kind of match some of the scenes that they used it in.
Because there was a sadness to the parts they used.
Yeah.
And that fit him really well. Like those scenes where he gets checked in to like the rehab center and he's just screaming in that room.
Yeah.
You forget, because everything else is treated almost lightly a lot in this movie. When something like that happens, it's shocking and brutal, and then you are like thrown back into reality, because Ed's enthusiasm has been protecting us from actual reality for most of this movie. And then when he's not there and Bella's left to himself, you get to see how far he's fallen. Yeah. And it's rough.
It is rough.
But that friendship is really what keeps both of them going a lot of the time. And I think when you really look at it, it is that friendship more than just the filmmaking process that is the driving force of this movie. Because Ed like literally needs to make movies for Bela to live, because Bela is broke and destitute and he needs this money. Right. But also Bela needs just Ed to live in the very literal sense, because he's always driving over there to
make
save
sure
him
he's okay.
and make him goulash.
I don't know how to make goulash.
But also just like we were talking about before, that reinforcement, that positivity, that's what he needed in his life.
Yeah, that's true friendship.
It really was. And I think you could look at it very pessimistically and say like, well, they needed each other financially. Like Ed needed a name to get his movies made. Bela needed the money from the movies. And there is that, but I don't for a moment believe how they are portrayed in this movie that there wasn't a lot more to it. Yeah. And of course there's inaccuracies in everything, and there are some in this. Like for instance, from my understanding, the first wife didn't have a big issue with the cross-dressing. She didn't yell at everyone like that. Bela did remarry before his death, but we just kind of glossed over like an entire person. Yeah. But wouldn't have fit this movie as well. No. But from all accounts, they were great friends.
That's good, though. I'm glad, because like it didn't seem like in this story, I mean, you said that he was married, but it seemed like Bela didn't have a lot in his life. Yeah. That was good.
The other inaccuracy that gets brought up most often is that Bela Lugosi didn't swear.
Really?
Yeah. His son, and apparently he was a great father too, even throughout his addiction and stuff. Oh, wow. But his son said like, no, he never swore. It just wasn't a thing. And I don't think he hated Karloff that much, but it's so much fun to have that bit.
You kind of have to have that, like, to play up.
I loved it, yeah. But I think the friendship of them is most apparent. There's that line where Ed is he doesn't feel shameful about who he is. Mm-hmm. But there is a moment where he's saying, like, you shouldn't have to wander around in the muck at 4 a.m. And he feels bad, I think. I feel like he does have some shame there. But then Bella responds with, there's not a lot of people I do it for.
Yeah.
And that's just, I think that encapsulates everything, and that's what made it so beautiful. It's not just this business, and that is driving a lot of it. Their friendship existed on its own as well. And that was one of the most fun things to watch. And then that extends into that kind of that cast of characters you were talking about. And this whole troupe of misfits is a family, and they're going around and they're getting more members, and they're becoming stronger as they do that. Because like how Tim Burton is showing us this movie through Ed Wood's eyes a lot of the time, and that shelters us from some of the things like the addiction. We do get to see the harshness of it here and there, but it's not ever present because we are kind of seeing things through Ed Wood's eyes. The character of Ed Wood also then shelters all of those people around him, because he is so accepting of whoever you are, whatever skill set you have. If you participate, if you love what you are doing, he is going to be your biggest booster. He's going to give you whatever you need. Right. And he's going to try. Well, he doesn't have a lot of resources, but he's going to try. He's going to give you everything he has.
Right.
And he isn't going to judge you. And he will just respect and embrace everyone who is willing to be a part of this process. And that's what so many people need. Whether it's Vampira, who was super judgmental of what Ed was doing, but when she is out of work, he doesn't judge her. He doesn't throw anything in his face. He just says, yeah, come do this. You don't want to talk? Sure, you don't have to talk. You want to whatever you need.
Yeah.
Bunny Breckenridge is a real fun character. I loved him.
Bill Murray.
Played by Bill Murray, of course. And he is a fun story in himself. He's like this wealthy socialite who was trying to get a gender affirmation surgery, and Ed doesn't blink at this. He's just like, oh, okay, because he's just so accepting of everyone. But Bunny's character, he never actually did get it because, different times, the technology is not where it is.
That would be a terrifying thing to go.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Like you'd have to really be brave in order to, possibly just lose your life.
Yeah, and or be damaged in so many ways.
Yeah.
But he did try to get it a couple of times, and there's crazy stories about what actually happened. In Mexico, the story he tells where they get robbed or something. I guess that all happened.
Yeah. And then there was a mariachi band with him?
Yeah, who saved him. So he's like, oh, now you're coming with me to Hollywood. But either way, that's another really fun character who Ed just passes no judgment on and is unconditionally accepting of.
Yeah, you see the difference between Ed and Dolores, because they're sitting at the boxing match and Ed is nodding along hearing Bunny tell him that he's going to Mexico, and Dolores is like, could you keep your voice down, please?
Yeah.
In this stadium full of people. And so you kind of see how Ed is just he doesn't really let anything faze him, which is a very admirable trait, but
he's
not
just
one that
so loving of anyone, of everyone, really. It seems like
it's not really a trait that works well in the real world,
right?
But he's built himself a little world where that kind of works for him.
Yeah, and I guess that's how it worked in the real world. Although it didn't make him a great director or anything, it did give him this support group who are going to go along with these crazy ideas that he has, right? And then right after that, when he meets Tor Johnson, the wrestler, who's George the Animal Steel. Is that his name? I think so. He says oh, I'm not good looking enough to be in movies. And he just says, oh, I believe you're quite handsome. Or he gives Loretta King, who is Juliet Landau, who I'm a very big Juliette Landau fan. I love her as Drusilla. It's one of my favorite Buffy characters.
It was an adjustment to see her speaking in just like an American accent.
And like not being all crazy.
Yeah, like she was so happy and bubbly and like...
Her voice didn't seem to fit her because I was so used to to Drusilla.
Her like kind of spacey English accent.
Yeah. And also that is Martin Landau's daughter.
Yeah, so it's nice to see them together.
And she is someone who like just got off the bus and wants to make it in Hollywood. And Ed's like, okay, here you go.
Yeah.
Here's your chance. There's a line in it that they say, Eddie's the only fella in town who doesn't cast judgment on people. And one of my favorite lines from Johnny Depp is like, that's right. If I did, I wouldn't have any friends.
Yeah.
And that sums it up perfectly.
That's
right?
hilarious. And I love it. Yeah.
So I think that's the real driving force. First, the friendship between him and Bella, and then this idea of this accepting, enthusiastic man who is able to create a community for himself to succeed to some extent. I know he's not like a big time making the best movies or as many or as big of movies as he would like, but there is a success because he's doing what he loves with people he loves.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of a better way to look at this movie, less about a biopic of a director and his career, and more about the story of a man or a group of people who are able to find what they need in others.
Yeah.
And that's why I think I love Ed Wood.
Oh, that's nice.
It's a good movie. And it's funny.
It's funny.
So much funnier than I remembered.
Yeah, it's funny. I think it has some like really charming moments that make you like happy about the world, which is sometimes hard to find.
Yeah, especially if you said watching a movie about a washed up drug addict and a cross-dresser in 1950s.
Yeah.
And you'd think, oh, this is going to be brutal. But it's not. It's joyful.
Yeah, it is joyful. Oh, I like it.
But you don't love it.
I like it.
Okay, I'll take it. I love it. It's a 8 out of 10 for me.
7? 6.5.
6.5?
7.
You gave like Step Up movies 6s.
Okay.
This is better than Step Up.
It is better than Step Up.
Okay, I'll take that. I'm not going to rate anything. Better than Step Up. I'll take it.
So our second sponsor of the episode is Taproot Publishing and the Taproot Spotlight, a service that helps businesses and organizations pay attention to the people they serve. Taproot tells you the news about the people and the companies that are important to you. You can use that information internally to keep everyone on the same page, or share it with the world in your newsletter, on your website, and on your social media channels. Paying attention pays dividends. Find out more at taprootpublishing.ca/spotlight. That's taprootpublishing.ca/spotlight.
All right, well, that brings us to the end of another episode. But don't worry, because we'll be back in a week.
Yay!
So join us again next week where we will each have a quick spoiler-free review of something that we like in our Things of the Week. And then Sam will tell us what we're watching for the big watch the week after.
I bet you can't guess.
I can't. I hope it's Plan 9 from Outer Space.
It's not Plan 9 from Outer Space.
Also, I should just say, if anyone wants to watch Ed Wood's movies, most of them are free on YouTube, and a lot of them are on Amazon in several different versions as well. So it's easy to find Ed Wood's movies. They're not great, but they're worth checking out to kind of experience them. They're an experience.
Right. Okay, well, that sounds fun. That sounds like a fun, bad movie night.
Nah, they're not that fun. They're no Room. The Room is a fun, bad movie. And one point, we will do a double feature of The Room and The Disaster Artist, and we will reference this episode on Ed Wood a lot.
Excellent. Okay, we'll see you next week, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.